So thanks everybody for choosing to spend part of your evening with us today. It's great to see some of our Green Business Network members here in the audience. And I'd also like to acknowledge Abby Rome here on my left side, who serves as the certification manager for our Green Business Network certification program. So I wanted to start off with a quick question. So the background to this question is that I was at an investing conference last fall. And it was for investment professionals. So it was financial planners and advisors and mutual fund companies, asset managers, representatives of endowments, foundations, and pensions. And there was a keynote speaker. And you can just shout out popcorn style. What do you think was the background of sort of the special keynote speaker at the conference? So you might think, hedge fund manager, but so it wasn't. But who do you think? Just throw out a profession that the conference organizers chose to keynote an investment conference. A farmer? Farmer, that's a good one. What else?
Environmental advocate.
An environmental advocate. What else? A
sociologist.
A sociologist. Interesting. Okay, so because we're short on time, I will tell you, the keynote speaker at this investment conference was a former astronaut. So why would they choose an astronaut to talk to this group of Wall Street people?
Perspective.
Right. Because the whole point is that usually when we think about our banks and our mutual funds or our pensions or any of that, we're not thinking about the planet. We're not thinking about the universe. And the whole idea was for these investment professionals to really think about the environmental impacts on a planetary level. What are the impacts of the investments that they hold? And so they thought, who better to get us thinking about the globe than an astronaut? I thought it was a phenomenal choice. And it's really that type of creative thinking and that level of awareness, which is what green businesses do every day. I mean, it's people who carry that vision in their heart and who know that their daily operations, they're bringing this consciousness about the planet with them. And so kudos to all of you who do this type of work day in, day out. At Green America, we're all about first starting with cutting consumption. Reduce, reuse, recycle, all of that. And of course, there are forms of consumption that we continue to do out of necessity, and we need to shift that to more sustainable options. We've been doing this work for about 35 years now. We have a national green business network, about 2,000 or so companies. They can choose to be screened by Abby, so then we would make them public-facing so that more consumers can learn about the products and services that they offer. Or if they're not quite ready for certification, they can still join our network. We won't promote them to consumers, but they can get our resources, e-newsletter, webinars, events, so forth, to learn more about how to move along that green business spectrum. We certify companies across 42 different industry sectors now. So it's not a generic form. You ask really different questions if someone is a bank, or if they make candles, or if they're a cafe, or they make mattresses. So our certification is really tailored to the specific realities of different business sectors. And then we have some general philosophical questions. I mean, they have to be mission-driven to begin with. They have to make sure that they're green, which for us is always bringing together the environmental side and the social side. So there's no point in having environmental sustainability if we don't have social justice with it. And so that's what we're all about all the time. And we say green, it's not a pigeonhole, just an environmental type of green, but that holistic view so that we're not pitting people against the environment, but again, looking at that holistic fashion, kind of like with the social entrepreneurs that Dave talked about, that they hold that vision as well. Most of the businesses that we work with are micro businesses, about 1 to 5 employees, although we do have some of the larger ones, Cliff Bar and Seventh Generation, and there are banks and mutual fund companies that join as well. The key thing is, again, that they throughout their operations and in terms of their actual product, they're taking into account social and environmental criteria and commitments. Another thing that's been happening at the same time, politically, perhaps in a slightly more positive way, is at the United Nations with the Sustainability Development Goals. And more businesses are trying to figure out how can business play a role in fighting poverty, in advancing clean energy, clean water, equality, responsible consumption, land conservation, and so forth. And more businesses, and even some asset managers now, are actually taking the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as an overlay to their operations, which is really fascinating. So I see this as a hopeful sign. I was reviewing some of the macro level trends, and they really dovetail very nicely with the UN goals. A lot of the macro trends, I'm sure some of you are familiar with Joel Mackauer, who's done a lot of work in this area. And some of the big trends that we're seeing right now are related to small businesses that are green, driving the clean energy economy, driving the push for clean water, water stewardship, and access to water as a human right, which is an increasing imperative. They're also focusing on more plant-based solutions, so alternatives to meat, but also using plant-based products as alternatives to plastics, the growth of green chemistry, and also trying to figure out how business can play a net positive role so that business operations overall across all of their impacts are more positive than negative.